An analogy would be the Sahara Desert. In the Sahara Desert, you have sand, which is nutrients. You have sunlight, but you have no water. If you add water, you get an oasis. You grow green plants. In the ocean, you have water, and you have sunlight in the top 50 meters, but the nutrients are trapped down below. And so by upwelling, that creates the oasis in the ocean. Great to be here. Thank you very much. And happy to educate you, perhaps, on phytoplankton. Phytoplankton, my favorite single-cell green plant, lives in the ocean, in the top 50 meters of the ocean, where it's warm and sunny. And when there are nutrients, phytoplankton grow very quickly. They double in biomass every 24 hours. And they absorb CO2, and they give off oxygen. Every other breath that you take comes from the ocean. So phytoplankton can restore the oceans. And this is, let's see, how do we get this to work? There we go. So we do phytoplankton. My company is Ocean-Based Climate Solutions, and we have a technology that can repopulate phytoplankton in the upper ocean. They are declining. The oceans are under quite a bit of threat from climate change. The warming is stratifying, making the top surface more resistant to nutrients upwelling. And with less nutrients, you have less phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are the base of the ocean food chain, so every other species depends on them. And so our technology is a wave-driven ocean upwelling pump powered by ocean waves. It just needs ocean waves and sunlight. You can see in the left design sketch, it is a buoy, a flexible fabric tube spooled up around the buoy and a 1-ton bottom weight with a one-way valve. The one-way valve just rotates 90 degrees. And when you drop it in the ocean, it self-deploys. The bottom weight is heavy, sinks, fills the tube with water, and when it's fully unspooled, then the tube is full of water and the entire unit bobs up and down on waves, and that valve opens and closes and forces water up the tube. So this is how you get critical nutrients from the mid and deep ocean up to the surface, to the sunlit zone, where you trigger photosynthesis and grow phytoplankton. And phytoplankton feed fish. On the right, you can see this test we did in the Canary Islands last November. Buoy's quite large, about 15 feet long. The tube is a 10-foot diameter tube, and as I mentioned, the 1-ton valve. This test was 200 meters deep. Eventually we'll go to 500 meters, and that's where the optimum nutrients are. The ocean is highly stratified, so there's an abundance of nutrients below the sunlit zone, below 50 meters, but those nutrients get used up in the top 50 meters, and there are limited nutrients. And so phytoplankton are restricted from growing, and more so with climate change. As the oceans are warming, that barrier is much stronger. An analogy would be the Sahara Desert. In the Sahara Desert, you have sand, which is nutrients. You have sunlight, but you have no water. If you add water, you get an oasis. You grow green plants. In the ocean, you have water, and you have sunlight in the top 50 meters, but the nutrients are trapped down below. And so by upwelling, that creates the oasis in the ocean, grows those green plants. Now here's the biological food web. In the very top small circle are the phytoplankton. Every other species depends on phytoplankton. Whales, fish, sea mammals, polar bears, people, in fact. Seabirds are not shown. The second circle are zooplankton. Those are the next species level, multicellular critters, want to call them. And they, in turn, are food supply for small fish, crabs, other ocean creatures. And then you have the larger fish and then the top predators, sharks, tuna, and so on. So that's the ocean biological food web that we all depend on. And related to that is the ocean carbon cycle. So here you can see the phytoplankton in the top 50 meters. And one of my favorite ocean species is called a salp, S-A-L-P. And salps live at 600 meters deep. They don't like sunlight. They don't have any sun cream. So they swim up at night and feed on the phytoplankton. And then at daybreak, as the sun comes up, whoops, no sun cream, better get back home, down to 600 meters. And they digest the phytoplankton, and they excrete fecal pellets, poop, which are solid carbon pellets, and those sink to the seafloor. So that's just one example. There are hundreds of ways the ocean carbon cycle works. That's just one way that's easy to tell and fun to talk about, and an important part of the ocean carbon cycle. So if we were to put our pumps in the ocean, what scale would be needed, and who would pay, and how much? And one of the numbers that just astounds me is the amount of oil produced by the oil industry globally. It is 100 million barrels per day. To put that in perspective, we took a look at the ocean and what amount of the ocean would be needed to remove the carbon content through the ocean carbon cycle of 1%, of 1 million barrels per day. And it turns out that we can do that in 100,000 square kilometers. And it would cost $5 billion. Now, 100,000 square kilometers is 1/4 of Bermuda's exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone is a 200-mile radius from islands and countries with an ocean border that is their jurisdiction. And so 1/4 of Bermuda's EEZ would be satisfactory, would be a big enough area to exercise the ocean carbon cycle to sequester 1% of global oil. Now that's something I can get my arms around. 100,000 square kilometers, 1/4 of Bermuda's EEZ. And so with our technology, we think it would be possible to restore that 100,000 square kilometers, sequester the CO2 equivalent from 1% of global oil. It would be a $5 billion cost paid by the oil companies. They have put the CO2 into the atmosphere. Actually, we did, buying their product. But the cost to do that would be a $32 per ton cost for the oil company, which is very competitive in today's market. The business model that we're pursuing for this is to directly involve the island nation, the government, in this case, the government of Bermuda, and they would essentially license their EEZ for this project and earn $750 million additional new government money. We'd build the pumps on the island because that's the most efficient and lowest cost, create at least 250 new jobs, probably more. And these pumps are heavily instrumented with sensors. So we would, over the 10-year project duration, have some 20 billion measurements of ocean data. This would be the most studied area of the ocean anywhere on the Earth. And we would involve the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, the local oceanographic institute, to study that data and ensure that everything is going well. And this would be an additional contract for the institute, essentially doubling its budget from 75 million over 10 years to 150 million over 10 years. And so, for some reason the numbers didn't come out here, but this would be the amount of carbon removed, carbon removed over the 10-year period, and the number of pumps built year by year, and then because they operate on ocean waves, once you get to the maximum number, that you don't need to add any more, and there's no more cost. The island is a great place for this. There's deep water, not too far offshore. We could put our floating factories right on the island where we hire the people to do this, gaining diversity in the economy. And we have a budget to achieve an environmental impact statement for this project. So that's the go, no go. We have to demonstrate that this is a safe technology. We have a test booked for next June 5th with the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences to do a short-term test of a basic pump at 500 meters depth, and then expand that to a 3-month test. That's how long a phytoplankton bloom lasts, so we want to measure the effects during the entire bloom. And then go to 5 full pumps for a full year, because we need to know what happens in January as well as in June. And so the total funding to get to that environmental impact statement is a $7.5 million total amount. And then if that's satisfactory, then the project could commence into a commercial. So there's the data. We get real-time data with this project. I think we're one of the few carbon removal technologies that has that capability. The team is here. I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is venture number 6 since 1972. Chief engineer Phil Fulham, Dr. Ian Walsh, our scientist, Salvador, sales and marketing, Bob Lipstein from KPMG as our financial advisor. And if any of you need a little assistance in falling asleep at night, here's some state-of-the-art papers that on the ocean carbon cycle, artificial upwelling, a refined narrative, and others, and happy to make those available to you. So this is a potential way to help solve the ocean climate crisis, bring back phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are the key. They need nutrients. Our pumps deliver those nutrients and trigger the whole process. It can be large scale, it's low cost as seen, quickly implemented, many co-benefits, and we would ask the oil companies to foot the bill. So thank you very much. I think I'm on a panel later today. Happy to answer any questions now or during that panel, and I'm a couple minutes ahead of schedule. So very good. Thank you all.
Be maintained, like constantly once you put that in motion? I mean, I understand there's a 3-month cycle for the phytoplankton, but then as the whole food chain gets involved.
It's a continuous process, yes. So the upwelling of nutrients is continuous, wave by wave by wave. You're pushing, and this is a gentle nudge to the ocean ecosystem. And I'd like to emphasize that there are proposals for ocean, call it engineering, that are, in my opinion, a sledgehammer. One does not want to apply a sledgehammer to anything, much less the ocean. And this is a gentle nudge, so it is a continuous process. The nutrients are upwelled, they're being moved down current from the pumps, triggering the phytoplankton, which are eaten and triggering the whole food chain. Yeah, it's continuous, yeah. Any other questions?
So you had mentioned that it was $5 billion for 1%. Does that mean that it's $500 billion for 100% of the removal? And second of all, you said kind of a real-time MRV or analysis. Does that, you really have a real-time, could you explain the real-time MRV process that you have?
Yes, so yes, it's $5 billion one-time cost to remove the carbon content of 1% of global oil. It takes 10 years for our technology to achieve that. It's not an instantaneous event. Can you extrapolate over to 100% of oil, I would say the cost would come down. We would do this not just in Bermuda, but Hawaii, the Philippines, other islands, New Zealand, Australia, Indian Ocean, and so on. So could be leveraged around the world.
You couldn't come up with a global GDP contribution requirement for achieving that.
Yes, correct. And your second question was?
You said you have one of the few technologies that has a real-time.
Yeah, the MRV and the real-time data. I guess we've reached the stopping point here. If you get a lot of data, then the scientists can crunch it substantially.